It's been a little bit over a week since 10.7 has dropped, and Riot has really held out on making any changes on the PvE until just today. Thankfully, we finally have some hard numbers and information on exactly what is shipping onto the PvE and what is going to be coming in the next patch in 10.8. Make sure you smash that like button, destroy the sub button, and let's jump right into the changes. First things first, Riot has said that they want to change the pacing of the jungle and they want to make ganking junglers a little bit weaker compared to junglers who play for themselves. This is to balance out solo queue and give everybody an opportunity to thrive, and they're accomplishing it with several changes. 1. Jungle camp experience is going up after level 8, so junglers won't fall behind super hard unless they're really feeding and not farming anything. 2. Jungle item sustain power is going up by 50% when you're on low health, so a lot of junglers can clear a lot safer and healthier and don't have to worry about dying in the middle of their clear. 3rd, the home guards effect now exists in the early game so that junglers who happen to die early, whether it be from an invade or a gank that failed, don't get completely smashed, as the extra movement speed gets them out onto the map quicker and can save them from getting double scuttled if they happen to die early. Of course, that's just one specific example, but the movement speed will help you all across the board in that sense. And then the 4th and last change is that solo kills give more experience early, while shared kills give less. This means that junglers who rely on spam ganking lanes and giving kills away won't end up as strong as they were before. Losing out on 20% of the experience that you got from kills in the early game is a really big deal. You know, being one level behind and not being able to hit level 6 in time for a really big fight, or being a level behind and not hitting level 11 for another ultimate spike is really important when you're talking about junglers who all have usually very impactful ultimates. As a jungler myself, I am excited for the changes, but I'm also concerned because if Riot gets it wrong, a lot of champions are going to be really weak right now, and it's going to suck because all of the middle of the pack champions are just going to get absolutely destroyed by either hard gankers or hard farming champions. You might be wondering why I'm including both hard ganking and hard farming junglers in that sentence, and that's because of the stipulation of what solo kills mean. If Riot is defining the shared kill experience as the lesser amount going to the person who got the assist, then junglers who get kills for themselves will still be able to snowball really hard, and everybody else, say a tank who isn't really going to get kills or doesn't want to get kills, will be put further behind. This massive change is definitely going to be reflected in some tier list changes, so be on the lookout for when that video comes out. Next patch is going to be crazy for the Bush Boys. Moving on from all the changes to the Bush Boys and their items, let's talk about all the nerfs and buffs to other champions. First of all, there are a couple champions who are getting gutted, and we're going to start with one of them. Aphelios' nerf is absolutely disgustingly huge. His Q is considered maxed at level 13 now instead of level 9, so his damage with those abilities will scale way slower. And instead of armor penetration, like a Last Whisper, he gets lethality, like any lethality item. This makes it better in the early stages of the game where his opponents wouldn't have armor, or against opponents who don't have armor in the first place, but that means scaling against tanks who he really needs help shredding through is effectively not possible for him anymore until he actually gets a Last Whisper item. Unless the stars line up and somehow somebody figures out some way to make getting the lethality early on him work by buying other lethality items, Aphelios probably isn't going to be anywhere near as dominant as he was in the bot lane. But if he does turn into some weird ranged AD assassin carry that is super edgy, then we're double dipping at that point. We already have talent, I mean, come on. And speaking of ranged AD assassins, we see a nerf to somebody who basically was that. KALISTA's armor is getting nerfed and her E-slow is getting nerfed, and this means that she cannot fight in the early game, nor can she kite as hard as she could in the early game, which means that her early game will be very significantly weaker, even though her damage isn't going down. A big part of KALISTA is being able to tank some of the damage that's incoming to you, and then use your ability to stack up your spears and use the slow and refresh from killing minions to kite your opponent and make it so that there's no way that they could ever trade with you unless they manage to all in and kill you right away. Riot is giving her a two-pronged nerf, hitting her in both the kiting and the survivability aspect. You might be noticing a theme at this point, as a lot of AD carries are finding their way into the buff and nerf lists. Xayah is getting a buff, and her E now does more damage with more feathers. Before, it used to have a 10% penalty per additional feather, but now it's only 5%, which means that those plays where you flash and draw all the feathers in to hit one person might actually literally one-shot somebody. And as always, that's just one specific example of a specific micro technique that gets buffed just from this patch. Anytime Xayah takes a trade, you best be watching out, because those feathers are gonna be hitting real hard. I mean, hey, even if Xayah is just QEing you and hitting you with 2 feathers, or maybe even 3 if she auto-attacked you at the same time, that's still more damage, and more damage is always good. Not to be left behind with her Yordle Gunner Spirit, Tristana is also getting a buff. Her E damage is absolutely skyrocketing at later ranks of the ability, making her 1v1 and 2v2 potential later on once you start getting towards level 9 absolutely disgusting. There is no other word to describe how much damage this is going to do. It's already nearly impossible to survive a Tristana jumping on you now, but once 10.8 hits, you better forget that dream because that is never happening again. And we've all either seen it or had it happen to us. Tristana sits in a bush and waits for somebody to go farm a minion wave, then she jumps out with her rocket jump, throws her E on, auto attacks them a few times, uses her ulti, and gets one last auto in, and they explode instantly. If you aren't 100% sure about the combo that I just described, and you might be thinking that Tristana's looking like a pretty juicy pick coming on the next patch with these buffs, then you should absolutely go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have guides on Tristana and other champions like her who are getting buffed on the upcoming patch. So, in order to play against them and as them effectively, you need to know what they're doing, and even beyond that, we have guides on lanes and macro and other things that you need to practice in order to improve and win your games. Everything that we have is made by challenger level players, and we're always working to bring you guys more and better content so that you can have the best edge to improve and win. And speaking about improving and winning, Oriana is looking like the champion that you need to learn next if you're trying to take over next patch as a mid laner. Not only is her W movement speed bonus and slow getting increased, which means she can kite harder in 2 different ways, but her E shield ratio is also increasing, which means that it's harder to deal damage to her in lane and to her allies later in the game. Oriana with a shield on an AD carry is already annoying enough, and now it's getting that much more difficult to deal with. Do not underestimate this change. Being able to slow enemies more or speed yourself up more can easily get you out of range from that killing auto attack or that killing ability. And let's not forget, it's also an AoE ability. You can slow down multiple people or speed up multiple allies to that higher degree, and that makes a huge difference in the course of a game. While this next change to Urgot hasn't actually made its way onto the PvE yet, we do have information from a Rioter that says that his changes are supposed to be going through for the 10.8 cycle. Riot is looking to buff Urgot's Q damage at all ranks and buff its scaling so that he can just do more poke damage and more damage in general as the game goes on, which is really nice considering that all he needs is a little bit of extra damage to get somebody in range for his R to execute them. Not only that though, the R cooldown is also going down early so that he can execute people more often. This is really important because with even just a little bit of cooldown reduction, Urgot can start ulting people every minute and a half. And that's disgusting. It already takes 30 seconds to walk to lane in the early game. Imagine you only wait a minute and then just get instantly killed because Urgot's ulti is up again already. That'd be really, really frustrating. On top of that, his E now actually properly gets movement speed on the dash, and all of these buffs combined could make Urgot a really, really strong pick in the top lane right now. As we continue the buff train, we take a step from top lane into the jungle talking about the Bush boys, or in this case, a Bush girl. Evelyn's Q damage per hit is going up, and while it may seem small, 5 to 15 damage depending on the rank of the ability, you gotta remember, she hits 3 times with it. And on top of that, Evelyn in the jungle has basically no Q cooldown. She does 3, maybe even 4 on a single camp. And when you're doing more damage like that to camps, you easily melt through them that much faster. And when your clear is faster on a champion like Evelyn, who scales insanely well and can kill Baron at 2,500 health in the later stages of the game, you're looking at some really worrying changes. Actually, why am I even mentioning Baron? Evelyn can just kill whoever she wants on your team. Even tanks aren't safe against her because her W just destroys their magic resistance. Last final little loop around about Evelyn, remember, not only will she be clearing camps faster, but the camps at the later levels are going to be giving more experience, which will just accelerate her even more. And when she scales that much quicker in 2 different ways, you gotta watch out. And then as far as multi-layer changes go, Lux is the last champion to be hit with several different kinds of nerfs and buffs. Her W mana cost goes up, and her ulti AP ratio goes down, but in compensation for that, she gets increased attack speed growth, which makes her farming and harass better, and she also gets higher E damage, both base and AP ratio. This makes her CSing and trading better, like I said, and makes her poke better too, but her all-in burst damage on just one combo will be lower. This might seem like a net nerf, but it's only a net nerf if you only play Lux for those big one-shot combos. And let's face it, Lux is an amazing champion who has a ton of pressure when sieging towers or objectives. You should be hitting multiple E's on your enemy, and with this change, you will notice that. You only need to hit 2 E's to make up for the difference on your ulti damage. That's it, and when you look at it that way, it seems pretty good. The W mana cost kinda sucks, but it's only up by 10, and it's not gonna be that bad. And now we've entered the realm where the changes are pretty much straightforward. Let's start with ASHE. ASHE's Q attack speed goes up at later ranks, allowing her to scale harder all the way to level 13 when she gets both her Q and her W maxed. 20% attack speed is very noticeable too. You gotta remember, this is basically what some items give you, almost 600 gold of free raw stats, built into just her ability. Having that much more DPS could be the difference between you winning or losing a fight, so why not take it if you're gonna get it? We also have another attack speed change, and this time it's on Master Yi. He's getting an attack speed nerf to his ultimate, and it's more so at later ranks. These are the kind of changes that you might not feel immediately, but you will notice them when you're getting items and you notice that enemies aren't quite melting the way that they used to. 5% in the early game might not be too obvious, but once you get to that 15% mark and you start reaching the point where normally you would have, 2 attacks a second and you no longer are there, you'll definitely feel it. The ultimate nerfs do not stop there though, as Varus' arc cooldown is going up at early ranks, and that sucks quite a bit. You see, Varus is very reliant on his ultimate. It's the only way that he has to peel for himself or engage on the enemy team, which I guess you could say engaging on the enemy team is the best way to peel yourself, because if they're dead, they can't hit you. But considering that it goes up by 20 seconds early on means that you just can't take fights anywhere near as often as you used to be able to. It's also important to keep in mind that this hurts DPS Varus more so than it does lethality Varus. The Legolas build always has a lot of cooldown reduction, and you're not really gonna feel it too much. Coming on down to the finish line, we've got 4 champions left, and the one leading the way is going to be Set, as Set's W base damage goes down by a small amount early, and it increases a little bit later, to the point where it's 30 damage off at rank 5. But will this stop him from winning those early game fights, and will this stop him from being able to do that 1000 true damage burst? No. And will he be able to be shut down? Probably not, considering that his crazy true damage potential is still there, and of course the shield is there too. Then we see probably the most targeted nerf to anything that we've ever seen in the game ever. Senna now is getting a nerf directly to her fasting build, and only her fasting build, because now her soul drop chance goes down to 22% on minions that she does not kill. This seems like a really insignificant change, and it's very odd considering that Riot could just nerf the amount of stats that Senna gets from her souls rather than making it a complete RNG fest. Not really sure what they're going with there, and it feels pretty lame. Soraka is getting some healthy changes as her Q mana cost goes down at all ranks, but she doesn't just benefit from that because she's also getting a base mana buff, which means that she'll be able to worry less about her mana in the early game and more about her own health bar, which, let's be real, is what's most in danger a lot of the time on Soraka. This will definitely be good for early lane and will definitely make her a more convincing pick in the bottom lane because she'll be able to poke and heal more. And the very last change that's coming to the PvE that we know of so far is going to be that RYZE gets a few tiny base stat changes, and I mean very, very tiny. He gets like 2 health or something like that, but the main thing is that his Q movement speed starts higher and does scale better as well. RYZE is a champion whose positioning is very important, and the movement speed that he gets from his Q, as well as the rune that he normally takes, which is Phase Rush, is very critical to him being able to function, and this change isn't going to make somebody who's just coming onto him be that crazy hyper carry that RYZE can be. He still requires a lot of practice, and this is mostly going to help the people who are already very, very good at him. And to get that much better at champions so that you can be that person who can abuse these sorts of changes on champions like RYZE, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. Not only do we have guides on champions that are all done by challenger level players, but we have macro guides, micro guides, lane guides, and more for you to practice and learn from so that you can get better, improve, and win your games. We're always trying to make more and better content for you guys, so if you have something to recommend, whether it be a champion for us to make guides on, or a topic that you think is really important, make sure you let us know in the comments below. If you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole video. What do you guys think about the PvE patch? I think there's actually a lot of solid changes here. Some of them might seem really minor, but those minor changes add up really quickly, especially when we're talking about those jungle changes. Even just a 10% increase in experience can easily cause junglers to be able to catch up to their laners in terms of their level. And I mean, hey, full disclosure jungler bias here, I'm always down to be on par with my top and mid laners levels. Anyways, as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.